Okay, to make my cookies, you're going to need 150 grams of salted butter, so that's what that one is, 85 grams light brown sugar, so I use that one, 85 caster sugar, which I've got golden caster because I like using that, 2 tablespoons of vanilla extract, 1 large egg, 300 grams of plain flour, which obviously flour is useful, quarter teaspoon, or sorry, half teaspoon even, of bicarb soda. You want a quarter teaspoon of salt, which I haven't got. There we go. So let's just grab that. There we go. Quarter teaspoon of salt, and then you want roughly, I don't actually have that amount, but you want roughly 120 grams of white chocolate chunks, and 120 grams of milk chocolate chunks. What I tend to do though is I'll buy bars of chocolate, and then I will, like the green and blacks, or tends to make this difference, and I'll chop them up into about 5mm squares ish, and then I use them like that. That's how when I say chunk, that's what I mean. It's about 5mm square. Yeah, and that's the ingredients you're going to need for making my chocolate chunk cookies. Okay, so first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to melt some butter, or so you can melt it via, as I do, in the pan, or you can use a microwave. But basically you want to melt it so that it's melted. It doesn't take long, but you want to make sure you've got about 150 grams. So that's 99, 98. All my measurements are, like, I've got exact measurements on the ingredients list, but I mean, when I do it, it's all quite vague. About 146 there, so oops, a bit more. 151, and then just because some stays in the pan, I tend to chuck a little bit extra in, and then then we just want to then melt that down so it's nice and liquid. Okay, so whilst the butter is melting on the hob or in the microwave, it wouldn't take very long in the microwave, but I don't use a microwave, I just use the hob, so it takes a couple of minutes on the hob, but not too big a deal. But yeah, so whilst that's melting, then I like to measure out the sugars. And so you want about 85 grams of each. So I just want to measure that out. Again, I tend to be quite rough with my measurements. Like, I've detailed out about how much I use, but I'm never exact, which doesn't help. I don't know, it always seems to turn out right, so. Alright, so we're at 86 there for the, that one's the dark brown. And then we're going to do the golden caster, so just reset that. There we go, back down to 0, and then another 85 grams of the golden caster. There we go. So it's 85 grams of each of the sugars. And what I then actually tend to like doing, so let's turn that off. Don't do that now. Just make sure the butter's melting. So yeah, what I then tend to what I like doing is mixing the sugars up until they're quite nicely mixed, really, essentially. Basically, kind of take out any of the lumps into the big lumps, and so it's quite evenly mixed. So you end up with just some, what was I say, like medium brown rather than dark brown or super light. You end up with just some medium light brown sugar. Basically, make sure you get out all the lumps. So using the spoon to squish it against the edge of the bowl to kind of knock the lumps out. And then just mixing it through, making sure that, there we go, see that now it's nice. Make sure I get the right angle. There we go. It's a nice light brown texture, or colour, sorry, and it's just even texture as well, so there's no big lumps or anything, and yeah, all mixed up. Right, so our butter is now melted, so the next thing to do is to add the butter into the sugar. So we just, as it's nice and melted, there we go, so you can see there we go, nice melted butter, and literally just going to pour it straight into the sugar. So some still stays in the pan, which is why I then tend to leave it like that, and then we want to whisk it. And to start off with, it's going to seem really runny and smooth and thin. It's horrible noise. Yeah. So to start off with, it's going to seem really runny and horrible and not nice. I'm just going to whisk it. Keep whisking it for a bit. And it'll thicken up quite quickly actually. I'm just going to keep whisking it, making sure basically you're not going to end up with any lumps, and that you're fully mixing the butter and the sugar. And as it cools a bit, it'll then cools and mixes and whisks. You'll end up with a bit of a thicker mixture, which is exactly what you want. So you kind of want like a kind of a toffee caramels kind of type texture. And so there we go. So as you can see now, just about to see there, the butters are kind of melted out. We've just got kind of a sugary, very sugary kind of caramel type texture and substance in there, which is awesome. So that's how we want it. Nice and smooth. So nice and smooth, and a caramelly texture. Cool. So that's what we want. Okay. So now that we've got our mixture, or the start of our mixture with the sugar and the butter, we now want to add 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. I tend to use the Nielsen Massies just because that's the one my local shop has essentially. That seems to be quite a good one as well. So then I add 2 teaspoons of that. Again, as with most of my measurements, really quite vague and rough. I'll pour it out roughly, and then there we go. And obviously I'll just pour it on the bottle as well, because I'm an idiot. But anyway, and then just beat that in as well, and that will then that will kind of thin it up. It'll make the mixture a bit thinner, but that's absolutely fine. That's what we want. Just want to make sure that's all nicely mixed in basically. So there we go. Now that's quite a quick one to beat in anyway, so it's not too big a deal. Next we then want the 1 large egg. It's an egg, you know. So you want to crack that and just dump that in there, and then fish out the shell if you've managed to do what I just did. It's not too big a deal. I wonder if the first time that I've done that and put shell into the mixture. Right, anyway. So yeah, once you've removed the eggshell, then if you've been silly and managed to get eggshell in there, hopefully you don't, then I just whisk it. It's going to obviously be a lot thinner of a mixture now, because obviously we've got the egg in there. It's a lot of liquid and that's absolutely fine. So we're going to beat that. Don't have to beat it loads really, to be honest. Just basically just making sure that you've kind of incorporated all of the sugar and the egg and the vanilla extract, and the butter as well, obviously. So obviously we've already done the butter and the sugar anyway. I like to shake off the whisk, because that's the last we need of the whisk now. So shake that off and clean it off, and then we're going to start on the next bits that we put in there. Okay, so now that we've done that, we want to put in the ingredients that we're going to actually sieve. So we want half a teaspoon of bicarb. So say I've just got some random bicarb, half a teaspoon of bicarb. Again, my measurements, as you can see, not perfect, but that's fine. I'll be able to sieve that. Right. And then we want a 1/4 teaspoon of salt as well, just for we do. So measure that out roughly. There we go. And that's that then done. So now we need about 300 grams of flour. So again, as with everything else, so it's plain flour. Just make sure it's plain flour, and don't get self-raising or anything like that. Especially don't get bread flour. But yeah. So we want about 300. I know 300 is going to be pretty much the end of this bag, and that's fine. Okay, well, we've got 287 there, and we'll then just top it up with some other flour that I've got. As I'm so exact, I'm actually going to, so we've got 287, I want 300, so I'm going to top it up with actually some, little focus, some rice flour. I've not used rice flour before, but I figure flour's flour, kind of really, isn't it, almost? As you can see, I don't really make sure I fully measure things. There we go. Put that out of the way. So there we go. It's just over, it's actually 305 that we've got there, but it's fine. And then just sieve that in. Give the sieve a little wiggle. Make sure we're nice and clear. Don't have any lumps. Any horrible bits. There we go. And we're all done. So now we're going to want to mix it. And to mix it, I tend to use a silicone spatula. Other people suggested like using wooden spoons for doing cookie mixes and stuff. I prefer the spatula because I can actually take the when the cookie dough's on there, I find it easier to take off. Whereas with wooden spoons, I find it kind of sticks in there. But yeah, so we just want to then fold in the flour and the flour, bicarb, and the salt. I just want to fold it into there. I'm going to take the scales out of the way, and yeah, I just want to fold it through, and we'll end up with a relatively tough mixture, and that's fine. So fold it, mix it, basically just working it all through and getting all the flour and all of the rest of the mixture kind of mixed together and mixed in. At times it may seem a little bit of a tough mixture, but that's fine. That's actually kind of what we want anyway. Because you'll see, like at times it will feel like a tough mixture, but actually it's still quite a soft mixture. And we don't want a runny mixture, so I'm just kind of mixing through it. I'm going to take it off the back of the spoon as well, and spatula. And just make sure that also, again, that we're mixing off the bottom of the bowl and all of that gets mixed in. As you can see, it's still not a tough mixture, but we want a bit of toughness to it. But we don't want it to be too, and we don't want it to be, but we still want it to be soft, and we don't want it to be too soft. Some of the recipes that I've used recently, I've basically made almost liquid cookie dough, which to me it's just not good. All it does is it just spreads out onto the paper and doesn't actually cook properly, and doesn't make a nice gooey chocolate chunk cookie. Right, so now that's done, we've mixed all that nicely together. Now I need to add the chocolate chunks. Okay, so you can have the chocolate chunks already prepped. Just because I'm doing this kind of in order of the instructions I've created, I'm just going to be doing it. Now, I tend to actually prefer to do the chunks a bit earlier, because I normally have the chocolate in the fridge, so I quite often end up chopping these up a bit earlier because I find it's a bit easier to get the kind of shapes that I want. But as you see, I'm just chopping it down the lines, and then I'm going to chop these then in half again. So go down the lines. I don't want massive chunks, and then I'm just going to go down the middle of each of these. I don't know if you can actually see it on the camera there. There we go. Alright, just go down the middle of each of these. The green and black ones I know make about the right sort of shape that I want. So just shake it off, and then just put that into the mix. As we've got the mix there. I tend to like using white and milk chocolate because they it doesn't kind of nice contrast. It makes the cookies a bit more fun. I really quite like. I've used like some other chocolates as well. I prefer the green and blacks. I find it doesn't melt all the way, and you end up with quite nice chunks basically. So I find that it works quite nicely. It's my favourite out of the chocolate so far for making these cookies. I have also used one which was quite fun, which was the Terry's chocolate orange. So getting that again, same with that, chopping up the chocolate orange or getting some chocolate orange chunk things, but basically just making it up into small pieces. So as I say, they're roughly kind of like 5mm ish kind of squares. Let's add that in. And I know at the moment that's roughly well, each of those was about 70-80 grams. So we've got about 140 there, and then I've got another 100 grams of some Sainsbury's chocolate, just because again, that's what I picked up. These, well, first time I've used this one, it appears to have some quite big squares, so it's going to be a bit more interesting to chop down, but shouldn't be too big a deal. So as with the green and blacks, I just want to make sure that I've got a bunch of kind of smallish-ish chunks. Just looking at that, yeah, I'm going to go over those again. So I don't want massive chunks. We're not making massive cookies, so we don't want massive chunks of chocolate. I mean, we can make large cookies out of this mix, it doesn't really matter, but obviously the idea is to make about, I say this recipe should make about 16, depending on the how generous you get with the servings essentially. Going through, chopping the chocolate, and we'll go through it again. So I don't want massive pieces. I mean, the length of those was the width of those wasn't too bad, but the length was just a bit much. So I'll chop that down and put the chocolate into the mix. Okay, so now we need to mix up the cookies and chocolate, or the dough and the chocolate. So again, so it's just a case of bits of mixing it basically. Yeah. You're going to mix it through. So what you want to make sure as well is that you've got a nice even mixture. So put that out of the way. So you want to make sure you've got nice, pretty even, and you don't have like chocolate chunks on the that aren't in the mix, and then also you don't have patches of cookie dough that don't have any chunks in. So you want to make sure, go through, mix it basically. It can take a little while to get the kind of it mixed kind of as well as you might want, but as I say, it's just kind of a case of making sure that you don't have any loose pieces of chocolate or groups of chocolate, because it's not too big a deal if you've got some loose ones, because you can chuck those into the cookies individually later if you need to. But yeah, so it's just a case of mixing up the chocolate into the dough, and yeah, there we go. So that's, we'll do it. There we go. So it's quite mixed. Obviously there's some bits where there seems to be a lot of dough and some bits where there seems to be a lot of chocolate, but it'll all roughly even out once we're measuring it out later. So the next thing I actually like to do, and you can skip this step, but I like to do it, so I'll be doing it this time as well, is chuck some cling film over the top and chuck it into the fridge for, well, now you can chuck it in for about 20 minutes till it's a bit cooler, because there'll be some warmth in it and it's a bit soft, for how I like to cook them. So 20 minutes would kind of cool it down and make it a bit stiffer, but I tend to go for a couple of hours if I want to make the cookies, well, not the cookies, the dough really stiff, and also potentially make it a bit more caramelly. I'll like leave it overnight or something. But so I'm going to put this into the fridge for 1 to 2 hours, and then with cling film over the top, and then we'll come back to baking them in it then. Okay, so the dough's been in the fridge for about 2 hours, and I've just taken it out. And now I've also just turned the oven on, and I've set mine to 170 degrees centigrade. Now mine's a fan assisted oven, so I want it about 170. If you don't have a fan assisted oven, then you want it about 190 centigrade. And then if you've got a gas oven, you want it about gas mark 5, roughly anyway. So yeah, so the next thing to do, aside from like waiting for the oven to warm up, is to then scoop up some dough. Now, some recipes tell you to use like a teaspoon or do it by whatever. One I found, and then I've now used it for my one as well, is to use an ice cream scoop, because that gives you a nice little ice cream scoop ball sort of shape, and that will then cook down into a nice decent sized cookie. So yeah, so I use an ice cream scoop. I've just got a metal one, that's just solid metal one, that's the one I've got. And so I literally then just scoop some cookie dough, make a rough kind of ball out of it, and then place it on the baking tray. And now, when I'm placing it on the baking tray, you want to make sure, a bit closer, there we go. So when placing it on the baking tray, you want to then make sure that you are leaving a bit of space between the edge of the tray. And obviously I'm using baking paper as well, so baking paper is a lot easier. You can take the cookies off nice and easily when they're cooked and ready to cool. But yeah, so you want to leave a bit of gap to the edge, because otherwise if you put them right on the edge, they might spill over or whatever. So just keep scooping out basically some cookies now. So basically, as I say, I just want to do this size of tray. I don't know what size it is, but this size of tray, I'd normally put about 6 on. Slightly smaller trays, I'll put slightly less on. Obviously, if I had bigger trays, then I'll put more on. But so it's roughly kind of like ice cream scoop size, you see. So roughly, and so you've got loads of chocolate chunks in there. Sometimes the dough will stick to this ice cream scoop, in which case I'll just kind of take it off and stick it back down to the rest of the dough. And so it's a simple process. Scoop out some dough from the bowl, make it into a rough ball, and then just place on the tray. So that's like the easiest step, I suppose, really, isn't it? Just to do that, and then another tray here, whilst we wait for the oven to heat up. So as I say, I'm just making balls of the cookie dough, and as I say, you can make them really big if you want to. If you want to make really big cookies, you can. Nothing stopping you. I just like to make them this sort of size with the ice cream scoop, because as I say, I find they're like just the right size, basically. Pretty sure my camera's having fun focusing on all of this. I'm not bothered like getting my hands all over the cookie dough. This is literally just for ease of making the balls, really, rather than trying to. I'll put 5 on that one, I think, just because. So as I say, I want to leave quite a bit of space between each of them. So I like to leave quite a bit of space between each of the cookies, so they've got space to spread. And I don't mind messing about, moving them about, or whatever, and touching the cookies, because it's just cookies, it's no big deal. The only reason I use the scoop is just because it gives a relatively similar sort of size each time I scoop it. Obviously sometimes I make them slightly bigger, sometimes they'll be slightly smaller. If you really want to just do it yourself without a scoop, you can just make up whatever sizes. I would suggest though doing balls of some type, or if you want to make big square cookies or something, then making sure they're quite thick, because they will spread out anyway. But yeah, so the next thing obviously to do is, once the oven's warmed up, is to then chuck them in the oven, and we'll chuck them in the oven for 9 minutes, and then we'll take them out, and they'll be slightly golden and they'll be just right basically, and then we'll leave them to cool, and then that's your cookies done basically. But yeah. Okay, so it's been 9 minutes, so I'm going to take the first batch out of the oven. And there we go. So as you can see, we'll leave them on the tray for a little bit so they can cool off whilst on the tray. But as you can see, they've gone from the balls, they're kind of sunk down into a nice thick chunky cookie shape basically. And then they'll also be quite soft in the middle, so when you bite into them they're nice and soft and gooey and nice. Well, they're not particularly gooey, so actually they're just nice soft delicious cookies basically. So I'm going to cook the rest of them, and then we'll check back in once I've finished baking all of them. As an aside, once I've taken the cookies out, I'll leave them out for a minute or two, and then I'll on the tray, and I'll take the paper off the tray. That way it actually allows them to cool properly. I'm using some baking paper, baking parchment. You can use some other ones. I forgot which one this one is. I'm going to check it now actually. So this one is, if we can get it to focus on that. The a bit closer, there we go. Greaseproof and baking paper from Sainsbury's. Again, Sainsbury's, just that's my local shop. I've tried out some of the other options for. I've tried some of the other options for greaseproof paper and baking papers, and quite a lot of them cookies stick. But this one seems to work quite nicely. Yeah, lots of the brown ones, the cookies seem to kind of stick, whereas these ones they don't seem to stick very much, which is good. Yeah, I'm going to get back to baking the rest of them, and as I say, we'll check in once they're all cooked. After about 5 minutes of cooling on the rack with the paper, as you can see, they don't stick, cookies don't stick, and I'll then take the cookies off just to make sure that they don't end up getting too warm, or the paper holding the temperature or anything. Then we just slide them off. That's easy. Can pick them up, and then there we go. That's 6 of them then cooling, and then the others are baking. Okay, so now that they're all baked, as I say, they're about 9 minutes each. I find that makes them like just about the right sort of amount of golden colouring and browning, whilst also keeping them then soft in the middle as well. Because soft cookies with chocolate in I just find them delicious, which is why I've kind of come up with the recipe. And yeah, so I've got a nice modelling of white and milk chocolate in there, and I can't wait to eat them. I'll wait for them to cool, because whilst hot cookies are nice, they can be a bit dangerous with the chocolate being quite hot. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed me kind of going through and explaining the recipe that I've come up with, and